The great hall of the Frost Moon Pack felt like a suffocating cage. Heat radiated from the blazing iron torches lining the massive stone walls, mixing heavily with the overwhelming sense of 300 restless wolves. The air was thick with the musk of roasted venison, spilled spiced ale, and the potent pheromones of warriors eager to find their fated mates. It was the night of the mating moon, a sacred ancient tradition where the moon goddess revealed the hidden, unbreakable bonds between souls. For the highborn, it was a night of destiny, power, and political alliances. For Elara, it was a night of pure survival. She stood frozen in the darkest corner of the hall, her fragile body completely swallowed by a coarse, oversized grey wool tunic. Her bare feet ached against the freezing cobblestones. She was an Omega in the cruel hierarchy of the Frost Moon Pack that meant she was a broken thing, a wolf without a voice, without a scent, and without a future. For 20 years she had been the pack's punching bag, forced to scrub floors and endure the kicks of arrogant warriors. Elara kept her head down, letting her matted, dirty, silver-blonde hair fall over her face like a flimsy shield. She clutched a heavy wooden tray of empty wine goblets against her chest, her breathing shallow. She just needed to survive until midnight. Then she could retreat to the freezing attic above the hound stables and hide. But the moon goddess had a much crueler plan. The grand clock at the end of the hall struck 12. A massive stained glass window above the raised dais suddenly glowed with blinding silver moonlight. The zenith. A heavy, immediate hush fell over the rowdy crowd. The thumping music died. Every unmated wolf in the room froze their eyes, glowing faintly as their inner beast stood at attention, waiting for the pull of magic. And then it hit her. It was a scent so incredibly powerful, it completely bypassed her logical mind and sank directly into her bloodstream. It smelled of damp autumn leaves and burning pine needles. It was intoxicating. It was dominant. Thump, thump, thump. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. Her inner wolf, a creature that had been suppressed and starved her entire life, suddenly let out a desperate, echoing howl. In her mind, mate. Panic seized Elara's throat. She took a step back, hitting the cold stone wall. Omegas like her did not get powerful mates. They were usually paired with low-ranking guards or forgotten servants. But this scent carried the heavy, undeniable spice of pure alpha blood, the invisible thread wrapped around her chest. It was a physical chain of magic dragging her forward. Her bare feet moved against her will. She stepped out of the shadows, navigating blindly through the sea of silk dresses and iron armor. The crowd was a blur. She only followed the burning pine. The bond pulled her toward the center of the hall, stopping her right at the base of the raised stone dais. Her breath caught. Standing there bathed in the silver moonlight was Thorn. Thorn was the upcoming beta of the Frost Moon Pack. built like a fortress. He had dark hair striking amber eyes and a ruthless reputation. He wore a tunic of rich crimson velvet and carried a heavy silver broadsword. Beside him stood Cora, an Alpha's daughter, from a neighboring territory, dripping in expensive gold jewelry and draped in pristine white furs. They were the golden couple.
Please,
perfect,
don't leave
powerful,
me here alone.
arrogant. Elara's tray
do this
rattled
without you.
violently in her scarred
Please,
hands.
I'm begging you.
The scent was pouring off him in thick waves. Thorn stopped talking. His broad shoulders stiffened. His nostrils flared wildly as his alpha senses caught the shift in the magic. Slowly, agonizingly, his amber eyes scanned the silent crowd and locked directly onto Elara. The moment their eyes met, a roaring rush of electricity snapped the bond
Look at
into
the fragile
place.
one now.
It made Elara's knees buckle. The warmth of it was absolute. It promised an end to her endless suffering. She saw the
Your
flash
defiance
of
is
undeniable
futile. I stand as the
recognition
ultimate authority
in his
in my
handsome
one.
face. His
There
wolf
is no
knew
alternative.
she was his
You
other
will
half.
yield,
For
or
one
you will
fragile,
break.
beautiful second, a blinding
I've
hope
rejected all!
bloomed
This
in
ends
Elara's
now!
battered chest.
There is
The
no
moon goddess
compromise
had saved her.
turning back!
She was going to be the beta female.
This is my
She took
final
a hesitant
word!
step onto the first stone stair. Mate, she whispered, her voice a trembling breath, but the warmth in Thorn's amber eyes vanished instantly. The recognition morphed into shock, then deep denial, and finally absolute blistering disgust. He looked at her dirt-smudged face. He looked at her ragged, oversized tunic and bare, freezing feet. Cora followed his gaze, her delicate brow furrowing in deep irritation. "What is the meaning of this?" Cora asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Why is this filthy Omega staring at you? Have the servants forgotten their place?" The hall grew completely silent. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turned toward the dais, watching the standoff. The tension was suffocating. Thorn's face turned a mottled red. It was the burning heat of ultimate humiliation. His chest heaved as his hands clenched into massive fists. The mate bond was humming between them, begging him to claim her. But Thorn's pride was a poison that ran far deeper than magic. He took a heavy step forward, projecting his voice for every single wolf to hear. Thorn growled, his voice a terrifying rumble. "The moon goddess pairs me, the greatest warrior of this pack, with a defective, scentless rat." Elara flinched violently. The words tore through the golden magic of the bond like a serrated blade. "Please," she whispered, tears spilling over her lashes. "Thorn, please, do not do this. I am your mate." Laughter erupted. It started with Cora. The beautiful noblewoman threw her head back and let out a sharp, mocking cackle. "Did you hear?" that Cora shouted, pointing a jewel-encrusted finger at Elara. The little Omega rat actually thinks she is destined to stand beside our beta. The cruelty was contagious. One by one, the nobles, the warriors, and even the other servants began to laugh. It was a deafening roar of mockery that bounced off the vaulted stone ceilings. They pointed at her. They sneered. Thorn fed on their amusement. He stood taller, his chest puffing out. "You are nothing, Elara. You are a stain on this pack. I am destined to lead armies. I will not have a weak, sniveling servant dragging my bloodline into the mud." Elara shook her head frantically. The rejection of a fated mate was a literal death sentence for an Omega. It was a physical tearing of the soul. "No," she sobbed, dropping the heavy wooden tray. The silver goblets clattered loudly onto the stone. "You will kill me." Thorn's eyes were dead voids. "Watch me," he sneered. He took a deep breath, standing at his full, intimidating height. "I, Thorn of the Frost Moon Pack, entirely and unequivocally reject you, Elara, as my fated mate." As the final syllable left his lips, the golden thread between their souls exploded. Elara let out a scream that did not sound human. It was a raw, jagged howl of pure agony that silenced the freezing darkness was supposed to be the end. Elara lay motionless in the deep snowbank, her grey tunic stiff with ice and her own frozen blood. The biting wind howled through the northern valley, a sharp, merciless sound that drowned out the erratic dying rhythm of her heartbeat. Her inner wolf was silent. The severed mate bond was a gaping, bleeding wound in her soul, leaking the very last drops of her life force into the winter night. She welcomed the numbness. Death would be a quiet, peaceful escape from a world that had only ever shown her cruelty. But then the snow beneath her cheek began to vibrate. It was not a subtle tremor. The ground groaned heavily, shaking with a deep, rhythmic frequency. Through the howling wind came the undeniable sound of marching iron, the heavy crunch of hundreds of armored boots, and massive paws tearing through the winter drifts. And then the scent arrived. It cut through the freezing cold and the metallic smell of her own blood like a sharpened blade. It was a scent Elara had never imagined could exist. It smelled of violent ozone right before a lightning strike. It smelled of ancient, deep winter storms, crushed black iron, and a raw, untamed darkness. It was an aura of absolute terrifying power, so vast and overwhelming that it felt as if it could swallow the stars themselves. Elara's heavy eyelids fluttered open, her dying inner wolf, the creature that had given up entirely, suddenly sparked to life. It did not whimper, it did not cower. It let out a low, vibrating hum that Elara felt in the very marrow of her bones. Through her blurred vision, the procession emerged from the dark tree line of the forest.
Your defiance
They were
is
riders
futile.
draped in
I
thick
stand
black
as the
iron
ultimate
armor,
authority in my
their
mind.
cloaks looking like
There
solid
is no
shadows
alternative.
moving against the
You
white
will
snow.
yield, or you will
They
break.
carried no colourful banners,
I've
carried
rejected
massive
all! This
shields.
ends now!
bearing the emblem
There is no
of the
compromise
crown-pierced
turning
iron
back!
sword, the Ironpeak Court,
This is my final
the
word!
absolute rulers of the Northern Territories. The procession stopped mere yards from the Frost Moon estate gates. The guards stationed at the watchtower did not draw their weapons. They did not shout a warning. Overwhelmed by the sheer crushing pressure of the approaching army, they simply collapsed to their knees in the snow, exposing their necks in a reflexive act of total submission. A single figure moved to the front of the formation, He was mounted on a monstrous midnight black stallion that looked more like a demon forged from shadow than a horse. The man was a titan. He wore a cloak of pure black wolf pelt, clasped at his broad shoulder with a dark iron crest. Even from a distance, the lethal dominance radiating from him made the freezing air feel suffocatingly heavy. This was not just an alpha. This was the sovereign, King Silas of the Ironpeak Court. Silas did not look at the Frost Moon estate. He did not look at the groveling guards. His glowing crimson-red eyes were locked entirely onto the small broken pile of bloody grey rags and silver hair lying in the snowbank. He dismounted in one fluid, lethal motion. His heavy iron boots crunched into the snow, each step slow, deliberate and echoing with doom. As he approached, the brutal winter wind simply died down. The heavy snowfall stopped. The temperature around Elara seemed to skyrocket the freezing air, replaced by the furnace-like heat of his massive body. He stopped directly in front of her. Elara looked up, her vision swimming with tears and ice. She saw the hem of his black fur cloak brushing the snow. She saw the heavy spiked plates of his iron armor, and then the king of all wolves crouched down in the dirt. Up close, his scent washed over her like a tidal wave. It was so overwhelmingly dominant, so incredibly safe, that the agonizing pain of Thorn's rejection suddenly muted. Silas reached out a hand. It was a warrior's hand, large, heavily scarred, and powerful enough to crush a skull with a single squeeze. But when his rough fingers brushed the frozen, wine-soaked hair away from Elara's pale face, his touch was as gentle as a falling leaf. Elara trembled violently, her breath hitching in her chest. Silas's crimson eyes burned deeply into hers. He saw the dark blood staining her lips. He saw the jagged, bleeding, magical wound on her soul where the bond had been violently ripped away. A low guttural sound rumbled deep in his massive chest. It was not a growl. It was a demonic snarl of pure protective fury that made the armored horses behind him whinny in sheer terror. Mine, the word did not come from his lips. It vibrated directly inside Elara's mind, a deep, velvet baritone that claimed every single cell of her being. The golden thread of her broken mate bond was instantly replaced by a thick, indestructible cable of dark iron and ancient magic. He did not ask who she was. He did not ask what had happened. Silas slid one massive arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back. He lifted her effortlessly, pulling her fragile, shivering body completely against the hard metal plates of his chest armor. The warmth was instantaneous. It felt like being wrapped in the core of a sun. Silas turned his face toward the great hall. The gentle protector vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, terrifying god of war. He walked forward. The massive, heavy oak doors of the Frost Moon estate, the ones that had been slammed shut on Elara's life, did not simply open. Under the sheer physical force of the king's aura, the heavy iron hinges screamed in agony. The thick wood groaned, buckled, and then violently exploded inward. A cloud of splintered wood and snow blasted into the great hall, crashing against the stone floors. The fast, thumping music inside stopped instantly. The cruel laughter died in 1,000 throats. The festive, suffocating heat of the room was completely swallowed by the freezing, terrifying darkness of the Alpha King. Silas stood in the shattered doorway, carrying the broken Omega in his arms. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so completely quiet that Elara could hear the frantic, terrified racing of 300 heartbeats. Every single wolf in the hall felt the immense physical weight of Silas's presence. It was a primal gravitational force that violently forced their bodies to react. One by one, the proud frost moon warriors, the sneering highborn ladies, and the cruel guards dropped to their knees. The rustle of expensive silks and the clatter of dropped silver goblets echoed like thunder. They bowed their heads, pressing their faces to the floor in unconditional surrender. Silas stepped forward into the light. The heavy thud of his iron-clad boots against the cobblestones sounded like a relentless death knell. Alpha Draven scrambled down from the raised high table. The leader of the Frost Moon Pack, a man who ruled with an iron fist, looked like a terrified pup. His face was chalk white, his hands trembling violently as he threw himself directly into the king's path. He bowed so low his forehead scraped the spilled wine on the floor. "Your Majesty, King Silas Draven," stammered, his voice cracking with raw terror. "We had no warning of your arrival. We are honored. The Frost Moon Pack is yours to command. Please forgive the mess. We were just clearing out some useless trash." Silas did not look at him. He did not even pause his stride. He simply walked past Draven, treating the Alpha like an insect beneath his boot. Silas's glowing crimson eyes swept over the kneeling crowd, finally locking onto the raised stone dais. He stared directly at Thorn and Cora. Thorn was still standing. His legs were shaking violently, his alpha blood screaming at him to kneel, but his arrogant pride kept him rooted to the spot. Cora, however, had already collapsed. Her expensive white furs dragged in the dirt as she pressed her face to the stone, weeping in silent panic. Silas stopped at the base of the stairs, right in the exact spot where Elara had been humiliated only moments ago. Up close, the king was a terrifying masterpiece of lethal power. His dark hair fell over his sharp, ruthless features. His jaw was clenched so tight, a muscle ticked rapidly beneath his skin. He looked down at the fragile girl in his arms. Her skin was ice cold, her life rapidly slipping away. A wave of frost began to creep up the stone walls of the hall, extinguishing the blazing torches, one by one, until the room was bathed only in pale, eerie moonlight. "Who did this?" Silas asked. His voice was soft, a deadly quiet baritone, but it carried the absolute compulsion of the sovereign. It violently forced its way into the minds of every wolf present, demanding an answer. Draven crawled forward on his hands and knees, desperate to appease the monster. Sire, the girl is nobody. She is a defective Omega, a floor scrubber. She interrupted the sacred mating moon. Silas slowly turned his head. His crimson eyes pinned Draven to the floor like physical daggers. I did not ask what she was. Silas said, the sheer command in his voice, making Draven choke on his own breath. I asked who broke her. Thorn swallowed hard, his chest puffed out in a pathetic display of bravery. He stepped forward on the dais, looking down at the king. He still did not understand. He could not comprehend why the ruler of all wolves was holding a dirty servant. I did, Your Majesty, Thorn said, trying to make his voice sound strong and warrior-like. She is Elara, an Omega of no lineage. The moon goddess made a mistake and paired her with me. I am the future beta of this pack. I cannot be tied to a weakling, so I rejected her. The words hung in the freezing dead air. Thorn expected a nod of understanding. He expected the warrior king to agree that the strong should not be burdened by the weak. Instead, Silas let out a soft, terrifying chuckle. It was a dark, hollow sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the room. A mistake. Silas repeated softly. The goddess made a mistake. Silas adjusted his hold on Elara, cradling her as if she were made of spun glass. He looked back up at Thorn, and the brief amusement in his eyes vanished, replaced by a roaring, apocalyptic fury. You felt the pull of the strongest soul in this wretched pack. Silas said, his voice echoing like breaking ice. You held a diamond in your hands, Beta, and you threw it into the mud because your fragile ego was threatened by her light. Thorn frowned, his arrogance warring with his fear. Sire, I do not understand. She has no power. She is scentless. Silas took a single step up the dais. The sheer pressure of his aura slammed into Thorn like a physical wall of iron. Thorn gasped loudly, taking an involuntary step back, clutching his chest as his inner wolf was violently forced into painful submission. She was scentless, Silas corrected, stepping closer until he towered over the trembling Beta. Because her true power was bound, because your pathetic bloodline could never handle the magic she carries. But you did one thing right tonight, Thorn. You broke the bond. You freed her from the curse of being yours. Silas turned away from Thorn, dismissing him entirely. He looked down at Elara. Elara's vision was completely fading. The pain in her chest was a massive void bleeding out, the last of her life. She looked up at Silas, her silver eyes fluttering shut. It hurts. She whispered, a single tear escaping to wash away a streak of dirt on her cheek. Silas' expression completely softened. The ruthless warlord melted away, leaving only a fiercely devoted protector. He rested his warm forehead against hers. I know, little wolf, he murmured, his breath a soothing balm against her freezing skin. The pain ends right now. I will rewrite the stars to heal you. Silas turned his body so the entire hall, especially Thorn, had a clear, undeniable view. He tilted Elara's head to the side, completely exposing the pale, fragile skin of her neck. Thorn's amber eyes widened in absolute mind-shattering horror as he realized exactly what the king was about to do. No, Thorn gasped, the word ripped from his throat in panic. You cannot. She is a servant. She is a rat. Silas ignored him entirely. The ancient magic humming between the king and the broken Omega was undeniable. It was the rarest of all werewolf legends. The second chance mate, a bond granted only by the sovereign wolf, powerful enough to override all previous connections to heal even a shattered soul. Silas lowered his head, his fangs elongated, gleaming sharply in the moonlight. Without hesitation, the Alpha King sank his teeth deep into the crook of Elara's neck. The fangs pierced her flesh. It did not bring pain, it brought absolute, blinding fire. The moment King Silas broke the skin of her neck, the agonizing void in Elara's chest vanished entirely. The cold, dark hollow where Thorn had violently ripped away, their bond was instantly flooded with liquid heat. It felt like molten gold pouring directly into her veins. Elara gasped, her back arching violently against Silas's armored chest. A shock wave of pure energy erupted from the point of the bite. It was a tangible physical force that blasted outward. The heavy stone pillars of the great hall groaned under the sudden pressure. The remaining torches did not just extinguish, they shattered, plunging the room into darkness for a fraction of a second. Then the light came. It was not the pale, distant light of the moon. It was an ethereal, blinding silver luminescence that poured out of Elara's very skin. It illuminated the massive hall with the brilliance of a midday sun. Down on his knees, Thorn shielded his eyes, a cry of genuine terror escaping his lips. Beside him, Cora shrieked, burying her face into her hands as the sheer pressure of the ancient magic pressed them flat against the cobblestones. Inside Elara's mind, a revolution was happening. The tiny, shivering wolf that had been dying in the dark suddenly stood up. The heavy, invisible chains that had bound her for 20 years, the dark magic that had suppressed her aura and branded her a defective Omega, began to crack. Snap, snap, shatter. Her inner wolf threw back her massive head and let out a deafening, triumphant howl. She grew, she expanded. Her fur, once a dull, dirty grey, transformed into a pristine, glowing white. She was massive. She was magnificent. She was free. In the physical world, the transformation was nothing short of a miracle. The silver light bathed Elara's broken body. The deep, purple bruises on her arms, inflicted by years of abuse from the pack warriors, faded into nothingness. The ugly, jagged scars on her hands smoothed out into flawless porcelain skin. The dark, sticky blood that had matted her hair turned into sparkling ash and blew away in a sudden warm breeze that swept through the cold hall. Her heart beat like a steady war drum, thump, thump, thump. With every beat, her true scent unfurled. For 2 decades, she had been mocked for being scentless, a hollow shell of a wolf. Now her aura exploded outward, crashing into every wolf in the room. It smelled of wild winter roses blooming in the snow. It smelled of ancient, untouchable magic and pure, untamed starlight. It was a scent so intoxicating, so overwhelmingly dominant, that several of the Frost Moon warriors wept openly, their instincts completely overwhelmed by the presence of true royalty. It was a scent that demanded absolute worship. Silas slowly pulled back. He licked a single drop of glowing silver blood from his bottom lip. His massive chest heaved as he looked down at the masterpiece in his arms. The bite mark on Elara's neck was not an ugly, bloody wound. It was rapidly healing the skin, knitting together into an intricate raised silver crest. It was the royal seal of the Ironpeak Court, a crown pierced by a sword, the ultimate mark of protection and absolute ownership. Silas's crimson eyes burned with a possessive fire so intense it could melt mountains. Mine, he whispered the word, a ragged, breathless vow. My queen. Elara slowly opened her eyes. The dull, defeated grey irises were gone. In their place were eyes of swirling, luminous silver. They glowed in the dim hall, radiating an ancient wisdom and a terrifying silent power. The heavy, ragged tunic she wore still hung off her small frame, but it no longer mattered. She looked like a goddess draped in beggar's clothes. She looked at Silas, the warlord, the monster, the king. He was staring at her as if she were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. The bond between them was a thick, indestructible cable of magic, humming with fierce devotion and profound safety. Thank you, Elara whispered, her voice no longer trembling. It rang clear and melodic like crystal chimes in the wind. Silas gently brushed his thumb across her cheek, marveling at her flawless skin. You were always a queen, little wolf. I just gave you back your crown. Silas turned his massive frame, still holding Elara securely against his chest. He looked out at the sea of wolves trembling on the floor. The silver light had faded, leaving the hall bathed in the eerie glow of the moon once more. But the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The Frost Moon pack was suffocating under the combined, crushing weight of the Alpha King and his newly awakened White Queen. Thorn was a mess. The future Beta was on his hands and knees at the bottom of the dais, gasping for air as if he were drowning. His alpha blood, the pride that had fueled his arrogance, was violently rejecting him. He looked up, his amber eyes locked onto Elara. He saw her glowing silver eyes. He felt the terrifying, majestic pressure of her aura. He smelled the winter roses and starlight that now filled the entire estate. It was impossible. It defied all logic. The floor scrubber, the rat, the defective Omega he had cast into the snow. She was a white wolf, a creature of myth, a royal bloodline thought to be extinct. The realization hit Thorn with the force of a falling boulder. The invisible thread of their severed mate, bond the one he had so casually destroyed to impress Cora, throbbed like a phantom limb. He had held a legend in his grasp, He had been chosen by the moon goddess to stand beside a being of unimaginable power, and he had thrown her away for a spoiled noblewoman with a pretty face. No. Thorn choked out his hands, clawing at the stone floor in a desperate, futile attempt to stand. No, this is a trick. This is dark magic. She is a servant. Silas's head snapped toward Thorn. The king's upper lip curled into a vicious sneer. A servant, Silas' voice boomed, shattering the silence and shaking dust from the rafters. You look at a goddess, and your clouded, pathetic eyes still see dirt. You are not just blind beta. You are a fool who doomed his own soul. Silas took one step forward. The sound of his iron boot hitting the stone made Thorn flinch violently. You rejected her because she had no pack standing. Silas continued, his voice dripping with lethal disdain. You threw her into the freezing dark because she carried no wealth. Now look at her. Silas adjusted Elara in his arms, ensuring every eye in the room was fixed upon her glowing silver crest. She does not need your pathetic pack standing. She is the sovereign queen of the Northern Territories. She does not need your wealth. The Ironpeak Court and everything within it belongs to her. Thorn let out a ragged sob, the sheer magnitude of his loss breaking his mind. He reached a trembling hand out toward Elara, a pathetic gesture of a desperate man. Elara, Thorn pleaded, tears streaming down his face. Elara, please, the bond. We can fix it. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, you are my mate. Elara looked down at the man who had ordered her thrown to the crows. She felt nothing, no anger, no sorrow, only a cold, absolute indifference. The golden thread between them was gone forever, replaced by the blazing, indestructible iron bond she shared with Silas. I have no mate but the king, Elara said softly, yet her voice carried to every corner of the hall. And you, Thorn, are nothing to me. The words shattered the remaining fragments of Thorn's sanity. He let out a choked, wet sound and collapsed forward, his forehead slamming against the cold stone floor. The pain of the severed bond combined with the crushing weight of the king's aura finally broke his physical body. He coughed violently, spitting up black blood onto the very floor he had ordered Elara to scrub just hours ago. He was ruined. Cora scrambled away from him. The beautiful, haughty noblewoman no longer looked like a queen. Her expensive white furs were stained with cheap wine and dirt. Her makeup was smeared down her pale, terrified face. She looked at Thorn with absolute revulsion, realizing that by standing next to him, she had sealed her own doom. Silas did not waste another breath on them. He turned his terrifying gaze toward Alpha Draven, who was still groveling on his hands and knees. Draven felt the king's eyes on him and began to violently tremble. Mercy, your majesty, Draven pleaded, a grown battle-hardened Alpha, crying like a child. We did not know what she was. We swear it. Please take my wealth. Take my lands as an apology to the queen. Silas let out a slow rumbling growl, that vibrated up through the cobblestones. Your wealth is nothing but pebbles to me, Draven. Your lands are dust, Silas proclaimed, his voice echoing with absolute sovereign authority. You have poisoned this territory with your cruelty, but tonight is not the night for executions. Tonight I take my queen home. Silas shifted his grip on Elara, holding her closer to the warmth of his chest. He looked out over the sea of terrified wolves. Listen to me closely, Frost Moon Pack. Silas commanded. The sheer overwhelming force of his alpha compulsion washed over the room like a physical shockwave. Bones creaked, muscles strained. Every single wolf was forced to press their faces, completely flat, against the dirt and stone. Look at the ground beneath you, Silas demanded. Remember the taste of the dirt, because the next time you hear her name, you will drop to your knees. The next time you see her face, you will not speak unless she commands it. And if any wolf in this miserable territory ever disrespects her memory, I will return, and I will burn this entire pack to ash. Silas paused, letting the terrifying promise sink into their bones. Now Silas roared, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Bow to your queen. A collective, jagged gasp echoed through the hall as the entire Frost Moon Pack submitted completely and unconditionally. It was a wave of pure, absolute surrender. Elara looked at Thorn one last time. He was a pathetic, broken shell, weeping into the dirt. Silas turned his back on the Frost Moon Pack. He walked toward the shattered oak doors, carrying Elara out into the dark, freezing winter night. The moment they stepped over the threshold, the brutal winter wind whipped around them, but Elara felt no cold. Silas's body radiated an impossible heat. In the courtyard, waiting patiently in the snow, was a massive royal carriage, forged from blackened steel and drawn by 6 monstrous, midnight black dire wolves. As Silas approached with Elara in his arms, the beasts immediately lowered their massive heads, whining softly in respect to the White Queen. The heavily armored royal guards slammed their fists against their breastplates in a unified salute. Silas carried her to the carriage and gently placed Elara onto the plush velvet cushions inside. He unclasped his massive black fur cloak and wrapped it tightly around her shivering shoulders. He climbed in beside her, and the iron door slammed shut. As the carriage lurched forward, leaving the towering stone walls of the Frost Moon estate behind forever, Elara finally found her voice. "Why did you come for me?" Elara asked, her silver eyes searching his handsome face. "I was just a servant. How did you know I was there?" Silas reached out gently, brushing a stray lock of glowing silver hair behind her ear. "I did not know who you were." Silas confessed softly, "But for 20 years my wolf has been restless, pacing in the dark, searching the borders of my kingdom for a scent I could only dream of. Tonight, when that arrogant fool rejected you, he shattered the dark runes that were hiding your aura." Silas leaned closer, his deep voice wrapping around her like a warm blanket. The second those runes broke, I felt you. Across the mountains I felt my queen bleeding. I brought my army. I would have torn this entire continent apart, stone by stone, to find you. Elara's breath hitched. A tear of profound relief slipped down her cheek. She was not a mistake. She was wanted. "Where are we going?" she asked, letting her eyes close as exhaustion finally claimed her. Silas pulled her gently against his side. "We are going home, Elara." Silas murmured his heartbeat, a steady lullaby beneath her ear. "To the Ironpeak Court. It is time you took your rightful place on the throne." Elara opened her eyes. The first thing she registered was not sight, but sensation. She was floating, or at least it felt like floating. There was no hard, freezing cobblestone beneath her back. There was no draft of icy wind biting at her toes. Instead, she was buried beneath a mountain of the softest fabrics she had ever felt. Thick, heavy pelts of snow, bare fur, and sheets of pure spun silver silk cocooned her small body. A deep, soothing heat radiated from the mattress, melting away the lingering aches in her bones. She inhaled deeply, bracing herself for the familiar stench of the frost moon stables, the damp hay unwashed, hounds and rotting wood. But her lungs filled with the crisp, intoxicating scent of ozone lightning and deep winter storms. Silas. The memory of the previous night came rushing back like a breaking dam. The brutal rejection, the agonizing pain, the terrifying arrival of the Alpha King, and the blinding, euphoric magic of his bite. Elara brought a trembling hand up to her neck. Her fingers brushed against the raised, intricate scar on her skin. The royal seal, it was not a dream. The golden thread of their mate bond hummed beneath her fingertips, sending a warm, comforting pulse straight to her heart. She sat up slowly, clutching the silk sheets to her chest. She was in a bedchamber so massive it could easily fit the entire Frost Moon Great Hall inside it. The walls were constructed of smooth, dark ironstone, polished to a mirror shine. Massive arched windows stretched from the floor to the vaulted ceiling, offering a breathtaking view of the Ironpeak Mountains. Jagged snow-capped peaks pierced the pale morning sky, looking both deadly and incredibly beautiful. A roaring fire crackled in a hearth, the size of a small cabin, casting a warm golden glow across the luxurious room. A soft knock at the heavy oak door made Elara flinch. Her old instincts flared. For 20 years a knock meant a beating. It meant she had slept too late, and the head cook was coming to drag her out by her hair. She scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the massive carved headboard of the bed, her breathing turning shallow and frantic. The heavy door swung open with a soft creak. It was not the head cook. It was 2 older female wolves, dressed in crisp, immaculate grey dresses with silver aprons. They carried large silver trays covered in domed lids. The moment they stepped into the room and saw Elara awake, they stopped dead in their tracks. They did not shout. They did not sneer. Instead, both women immediately dropped to their knees, bowing their heads low to the floor. "Good morning, my queen," they said in perfect, respectful unison. Elara froze. She looked around the empty room, half expecting Cora or some other noblewoman to be standing behind her. But there was no one else. They were talking to her. "Please," Elara stammered, her voice raspy from sleep. "You do not have to kneel. Please stand up. I am not." She could not even finish the sentence. The word Omega tasted like ash on her tongue. She was not that anymore. But she did not know how to be a queen. The maids remained kneeling. "We would not dare disrespect the sovereign Luna," one of them said softly, keeping her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. "His Majesty, the King, has ordered us to serve you. We have brought a morning feast, and a hot bath has been drawn for you in the adjoining chamber." Elara stared at the silver trays. The smell of roasted venison, honey, glazed breads, and warm, spiced milk drifted through the air. Her stomach let out a violent, painful rumble. She had not eaten a proper meal in 3 days. Before she could tell them to bring the food closer, the temperature in the room suddenly shifted. The scent of ancient storms and dark magic surged thick and overwhelming. The heavy doors opened wider, and King Silas walked in. He was not wearing his terrifying spiked black armor today. He wore a simple dark tunic that clung tightly to his massive chest and broad shoulders, and dark trousers tucked into heavy leather boots. Without the armor, he looked less like a warlord and more like a devastatingly handsome, lethally dangerous man. His dark hair was slightly damp, falling into his glowing crimson eyes. The moment he looked at Elara, the lethal, intimidating edge of his aura completely vanished. The dominating pressure in the room evaporated, replaced by a fierce, suffocating blanket of pure protection. "Leave us, Silas," commanded his voice, a low rumble. The maids quickly placed the trays on a heavy oak table near the bed, bowed deeply to Silas, and scurried out of the room, closing the massive doors behind them. Silas walked slowly toward the bed. With every step he took, the golden bond connecting their souls pulled tighter, drawing Elara in like a magnet. Her inner wolf, the massive white creature of starlight and magic, purred in the back of her mind, completely at peace in the presence of her true mate. Silas stopped at the edge of the mattress. He sat down slowly, the heavy mattress dipping under his immense weight. "Did they frighten you?" Silas asked, his voice incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to the monster who had brought the Frost Moon Pack to its knees hours ago. Elara shook her head quickly. No, they were kind. I am not used to it. Someone calling me a queen." Silas reached out. He did not grab or force. He offered his large, calloused hand, palm up, waiting for her permission. Elara slowly released her grip on the sheets and placed her small, pale hand in his. The heat of his touch sent a jolt of pure electricity up her arm, settling deep in her chest. "You will get used to it," Silas murmured, his thumb brushing slowly over her knuckles. Because that is what you are. You are the White Queen of the Ironpeak Court. This entire mountain range, the valleys below, the skies above, they belong to you. Elara looked into his crimson eyes. The sincerity radiating from him was absolute. I do not know how to rule, she whispered, her insecurities rising to the surface. I only know how to scrub floors. I cannot read military reports. I do not know how to host a royal summit. Silas let out a soft, deep breath. You do not need to know how to read military reports, little wolf. That is my job. I am the sword that strikes your enemies. I am the shield that guards your back. Your only job, Elara, is to exist. Your only job is to heal, to eat, and to let me worship the ground you walk upon. Elara's breath hitched. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. Silas stood up, pulling her gently with him. Come, you are starving. I can hear your stomach from the hallway. He led her to the oak table, pulling out a heavy wooden chair, draped in soft furs. When Elara sat down, Silas did not take the seat across from her. Instead, he pulled up a smaller stool and sat right beside her. He reached for the silver dome covering the largest tray and lifted it. The smell of rich, perfectly roasted venison hit Elara's nose. Next to it was a bowl of steaming sweet porridge, fresh berries, and thick slices of honeyed bread. Elara reached for a piece of bread, her hand trembling slightly. She was so used to eating mouldy scraps stolen from the hound kennels. To have fresh, warm food placed in front of her felt like a sin. She took a bite. The sweet, rich taste of honey and butter exploded on her tongue. A soft moan of pure pleasure escaped her lips. Silas watched her, his crimson eyes tracking every movement of her mouth. A dark, intensely possessive fire burned in his gaze. Take your time, he said softly. There is no one here to snatch it away. You will never know hunger again, Elara. I swear it on my soul. For the first time in 20 years, Elara felt safe. But as she reached for a piece of the roasted meat, another heavy knock echoed through the chamber. This one was urgent, sharp, and frantic. Silas's head snapped toward the door. The tender, devoted mate vanished in a split second, replaced instantly by the ruthless Alpha King. Enter. Silas commanded, his voice cold and hard enough to freeze water. The doors opened, and an elderly wolf with thinning grey hair and sharp, intelligent eyes hurried into the room. He carried a heavy leather satchel and a scroll of ancient parchment. He bowed deeply, clearly, out of breath. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, the old wolf gasped. But it is urgent. Silas stood up, his massive frame shielding Elara from the newcomer. What is it, Knox? Knox, the royal physician and historian of the Ironpeak Court, looked up. His eyes darted past Silas, landing directly on Elara. I have analyzed the blood residue left on your armor from last night. Sire Knox said, his hands trembling. The girl, the Queen, I know exactly who she is, and I know what Draven of the Frost Moon Pack did to her family 20 years ago. The heavy silence in the room was shattered by Knox's ragged breathing. Silas did not move, but the temperature in the bedchamber instantly plummeted. Explain, Silas commanded, a low, lethal whisper that carried the weight of an executioner's blade. Knox took a hesitant step forward and pulled a small glass vial from his satchel. Inside was a single drop of blood collected from the king's armor. But the liquid was not crimson. It was glowing with a brilliant, undeniable silver light. When a normal wolf bleeds, Knox began, his voice wavering, their blood turns dark when exposed to a reactive silver solution. But when I tested the blood from your armor, sire, it illuminated the entire laboratory. There is only one bloodline in the history of our world that possesses this trait. Knox unrolled the ancient, crumbling parchment on the table. It was an old map. Territories that now belonged to the Frost Moon Pack were marked with a completely different crest. A silver pine tree under a full moon. The White Pine Clan, Knox breathed out. They were a peaceful, deeply magical pack. They bred healers, seers, and white wolves. They went extinct 20 years ago. That is what the world was told. Knox corrected, a tear slipping down his wrinkled cheek. The official history states a plague wiped them out. But it was a lie. There was no plague. It was a slaughter. The words struck Elara with physical force. Flashes of memory, completely alien, yet undeniably hers, violently invaded her mind. She saw a flash of silver fur. She heard the deafening screams of women and children. She smelled burning pine and spilled blood. Alpha Draven coveted the rich lands of the White Pine Valley. Knox explained, his voice shaking with outrage. He knew he could not conquer them in a fair war, so he asked for a peace summit. He entered their great hall as a guest, broke the sacred laws of hospitality, and slaughtered the Alpha and Luna while they were unarmed. Elara let out a choked, broken sob. Her mother, her father, Draven murdered every adult to ensure no one could challenge his claim, Knox said. But he could not kill the infant heir. The backlash from the moon goddess would have cursed him. Instead, he forced his pack witches to weave dark runes into her soul. They bound her wolf, suppressed her aura, and erased her scent entirely. He made you a slave in the very castle your ancestors built. Silence descended upon the chamber. Elara sat frozen. For 20 years she had believed she was a mistake. She was not. She was a stolen queen. A low guttural sound ripped through the room. It did not sound human. Silas was transforming. The king was losing his grip on his human form. His massive shoulders expanded, tearing his dark tunic. His fingernails elongated into thick, razor-sharp, black claws that gouged deep grooves into the solid oak table. His fangs descended, and his crimson eyes burned with a chaotic, unhinged madness. The sheer apocalyptic rage pouring off him was terrifying. The mate bond was broadcasting Elara's agony directly into his heart. He had left the murderer of his mate's family alive. I will rip his spine from his body while he still breathes. Silas snarled, his voice distorted and demonic. I will burn the Frost Moon estate to the ground and salt the earth. Every wolf who ever laid a hand on her will beg for the mercy of death. He turned violently toward the door. He was going to march south and paint the snow red. Wait! The word was small, but it echoed through the chaotic room with absolute clarity. Silas stopped immediately. Elara stood up. She was trembling violently, but her silver eyes were no longer wide with fear. They were glowing. She walked toward the towering, enraged Alpha King. She did not flinch from his claws. She reached out and placed her small, pale hands directly onto his massive chest. The moment her skin touched him, the wild storm inside Silas halted. The scent of winter roses washed over him, forcing his raging wolf to submit to its mate. Silas looked down at her, his fangs retracting slowly. Do not kill them yet, Elara whispered, her voice echoing with the authority of the White Pine clan. Silas' brow furrowed. They tortured you, Elara. They murdered your parents. I cannot let them breathe another hour. I know, she said softly, and they will pay. But if you slaughter them now, they will die thinking I am still a weak Omega. Draven stole my crown. Thorn tried to break my soul. I do not want them simply destroyed. I want them to look at the girl they starved, and I want them to watch me take everything from them. Silas stared at his mate. The fragile servant was gone. In her place stood a sovereign queen forged in fire. A slow, dark, and utterly lethal smile curved onto the Alpha King's lips. As you wish, my queen, Silas murmured. We will not just give them death. We will give them absolute despair. The next 2 weeks at the Ironpeak Court were a blur of profound transformation. Under the fierce protection of King Silas, the physical wounds of Elara's past vanished completely. Her hollowed cheeks filled in, bringing a breathtaking aristocratic beauty to her face. Her silver blonde hair now cascaded down her back like a river of spun moonlight. But the physical healing was the easy part. The true challenge lay within her mind. For 20 years, Elara had been conditioned to make herself small. She was taught that her inner wolf was a dangerous, useless thing that needed to be caged. Even with the dark runes broken, her mind instinctively built walls to hold back the terrifying immense ocean of power that now churned inside her chest. She was afraid that if she let go, the magic would consume her entirely. Silas knew this. He felt her hesitation. Through the golden thread of their mate bond, feeling the way her heart would frantically stutter every time her eyes began to glow. He did not push her. He did not demand she become a warrior overnight. Instead, he became her anchor. On the 15th day, Silas took her deep into the ancient forbidden heart of the Ironpeak Mountains. They walked side by side through a dense freezing forest of towering black pines the snow crunching softly beneath their boots. The air up here was thin, practically vibrating with ancient magic. It was the sacred grove, a place where only the sovereign rulers were permitted to enter. Silas stopped in the center of a wide, snow-covered clearing. The sky above was a brilliant, cloudless blue. He turned to face her, his crimson eyes soft and steady. "It is time, little wolf," Silas murmured, his deep voice carrying on the freezing wind. Elara wrapped her thick fur cloak tighter around her shoulders. Her heart immediately began to race. Thump, thump, thump. I do not know how she confessed, looking down at the snow. Every time I try to reach for her, I remember the pain of the runes. I remember the darkness. What if I lose control? What if I cannot change back? Silas stepped closer, closing the distance between them. He reached out his large hands, cupping her face, his thumbs gently stroking her cheekbones to ground her in the present moment. His scent of ozone, deep winter storms, and dark lightning enveloped her entirely. It was a blanket of absolute safety. "You will not lose control," Silas said, his voice a hypnotic rumble that spoke directly to her soul. "Because I am right here. I am the tether that keeps you from flying away. You are the White Queen Elara. The magic inside you is not a weapon of destruction. It is the breath of the earth. Let her breathe." Elara closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth of his massive hands. She focused on the golden thread of their bond. It thrummed with a steady rhythmic pulse, radiating absolute love and devotion. Drawing strength from the king, she finally stopped fighting herself. She threw open the heavy iron doors in her mind. The transformation did not hurt. It was a seamless explosion of pure magic. A blinding pillar of ethereal silver light erupted from Elara's body, shooting straight up into the clear blue sky. The sheer force of the energy created a sudden warm wind that whipped through the clearing, blowing the snow backward in a massive ring. Inside the light, Elara felt her human form dissolve into absolute freedom. The heavy weight of her past burned away in the silver fire. When the light finally faded, Elara was gone. In her place stood a creature of myth. She was a massive, breathtaking white wolf. She was taller than a war horse, her fur so pristine and luminescent that it seemed to glow with its own internal starlight. Her eyes were pools of liquid silver, radiating ancient wisdom. Silas slowly let his arms drop to his sides. The ruthless warlord stood in absolute awe. "Magnificent," he whispered. Elara took a step forward. The moment her massive white paw touched the frozen dead ground, a miracle occurred. The ancient magic of the White Pine clan pulsed through her. The snow instantly melted. Deep, vibrant green grass shot up from the soil. A cluster of wild, beautiful, white winter roses bloomed instantly, their sweet fragrance filling the cold air. She was the healer of the land. She let out a soft, echoing howl of pure joy. Silas smiled, a genuine, rare expression. Then he unleashed his own power. Darkness exploded from the king. It was a violent, swirling storm of black smoke and crackling blue lightning. His shift was brutal and instantaneous. When the smoke cleared, Silas stood as a monstrous, terrifying dire wolf of midnight black fur. He was even larger than Elara, a behemoth of muscle teeth and shadow with crimson eyes glowing like dying suns. But as he looked at the glowing white wolf, the monster lowered his massive head, offering a soft, rumbling whine of pure submission and adoration to his queen. They ran. For hours the King of Shadows and the Queen of Light tore through the sacred grove. The air sparked with the friction of their combined magic. When they finally shifted back to their human forms, Silas wrapped his massive fur cloak around her shivering shoulders. "You were born to rule, Elara," Silas murmured, capturing her lips in a deep, passionate kiss. "The winter solstice summit is in 2 days," Silas said as they pulled away, his voice hardening as the reality of their world intruded. "Every alpha in the Northern Territories will gather at High Rock Keep. Draven will be there. Thorn will be there. Are you ready to face them, my queen?" Elara looked at the trail of blooming white roses she had left in the snow. "I am ready," Elara said, her voice completely steady. "Let us go to the summit, Silas. It is time they bow to the ghost they created." While the Ironpeak Court was bathed in starlight and blooming roses, the Frost Moon estate had become a tomb of shadows and rotting hope. The great hall, once a place of celebration, was now completely silent. The wolves of the Frost Moon pack moved like ghosts, their heads low, their voices nothing more than frightened whispers. They could still feel the lingering heavy weight of the Alpha King's command in their bones. Thorn was no longer the proud future Beta. He was a broken, hollowed-out shell of a man. He spent his days and nights in the dark corners of the estate's wine cellar, surrounded by empty bottles and the stench of his own failure. He had lost his rank. He had lost his respect. But worst of all, he had lost his soul. The phantom pain of the severed mate bond was a constant agonizing hum in his chest. Every time he slept, he saw Elara, not the dirt-smudged servant he had rejected, but the magnificent, glowing queen she had become. He would wake up screaming, his hands clawing at his own throat. He had held a goddess, and he had thrown her to the wolves. The cellar door creaked open, letting in a sliver of grey light. Alpha Draven stepped into the room. The leader of the Frost Moon pack had aged 10 years in the span of 2 weeks. His hair was completely white, now his face a map of deep, frantic lines. The fear of Silas's return was eating him alive from the inside out. "Get up, Thorn," Draven hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. Thorn did not move. He just stared at the stone wall, his eyes bloodshot and vacant. "Leave me alone, Alpha. There is nothing left. There is everything left if you want to keep your head on your shoulders." Draven roared, kicking an empty bottle across the floor. do you think the king is going to let us live? The winter solstice summit is in 2 days. We have been summoned to High Rock Keep. If we walk into that hall without a plan, we are dead men walking. Thorn let out a dry, hacking laugh. We are already dead, Draven. You saw her. She is a white wolf. She is the heir you tried to murder 20 years ago. The earth itself answers to her. What plan could possibly stop a goddess? Draven leaned down, his eyes gleaming with a desperate, unhinged light. A goddess can still bleed, Thorn, and even the strongest magic can be poisoned. Draven reached into the folds of his heavy fur cloak and pulled out a small, jagged glass vial. It was filled with a liquid so dark it looked like liquid shadow, pulsing with a sickly greenish light. Thorn squinted at the vial. What is that? This is the end of the Iron King's spell, Draven whispered, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. I reached out to a contact in the southern wastes, an alchemist who deals in the forbidden. This is not normal wolfsbane. This is an extract from the black hemlock. It is a soul killer. Draven held the vial closer to Thorn's face. The white wolves are powerful, yes, but their power is tied to their purity. This poison will rot her magic from the inside out. One drop in her wine, and her heart will stop before she can even let out a whimper. And once she is dead, the king's second chance bond will shatter. He will be weakened, distracted by the grief of losing his mate. That is when we strike. Thorn looked at the dark poison. A twisted, sick sense of satisfaction began to bloom in his chest. He hated Silas. He hated the man who had taken what was supposed to be his. If he could not have her, if he had truly lost his chance at greatness, then he did not want anyone else to have her either. If she dies, Thorn began, his voice raspy and cruel, the king will burn the entire world down. Then we will be the ones standing in the ashes, Draven countered. Better to die fighting than to spend the rest of our lives kneeling before a kitchen rat. Thorn stood up slowly, his joints popping. He wiped the wine from his chin and reached out, taking the vial from Draven's hand. The glass felt freezing, vibrating with a malevolent energy. The king will be watching her every move, Thorn said. How do we get close enough? Draven let out a cold, sharp smile. The laws of the summit are ancient, Thorn. As her former mate, you have a right to offer a gesture of peace, a formal apology, a toast to her health. I will do it, Thorn whispered. 2 days later, at the borders of the Ironpeak territory, the royal procession was already on the move. 600 armored riders on black horses led the way. In the center of the formation was the massive iron carriage, drawn by the 6 midnight dire wolves. Inside the carriage, Elara sat beside Silas, her hand tucked securely into his. She wore a gown of deep emerald velvet, the bodice embroidered with silver pine needles. She felt stronger than she ever had in her life. The magic of the white wolf was a steady, warm hum in her blood. Are you nervous? Silas asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. A little, she admitted. Not of them, but of the memories. High Rock Keep is where my parents were murdered. Silas pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. You are not that helpless infant anymore, Elara. You are a sovereign. You are the balance to my darkness. If they so much as breathe in your direction without your permission, I will end them. I know, Silas, she said softly, but I do not want you to end them. Not yet. I want them to see the truth first. As the massive stone towers of High Rock Keep appeared on the horizon, Alara's silver eyes began to glow with a faint, dangerous light. The hunters were coming, but they did not realize they were walking into the den of a goddess. High Rock Keep was a fortress carved directly into the side of a jagged, towering mountain. For centuries, it had served as neutral ground for the Northern Territories. The massive central hall was a cavernous space of grey stone, lit by hundreds of roaring fire pits that cast dancing shadows against the vaulted ceiling. Tonight, the air inside the keep was incredibly thick. It buzzed with the nervous energy of 100 different pack leaders, alphas, betas, and high-born nobles from every corner of the frozen north stood around the massive circular oak tables. They whispered behind their hands, their eyes constantly darting toward the heavy iron doors at the front of the hall. Rumors had spread like wildfire over the last 2 weeks. The Alpha King had taken a mate, not a fierce warrior princess, but an Omega from the Frost Moon Pack. The very thought of it had insulted many of the proud, ancient bloodlines present. Standing near the back of the hall, Alpha Draven and Thorn blended into the shadows. Draven's hands were shaking so badly he had to clasp them behind his back. Thorn stood rigid, his hand resting over his heart, feeling the cold glass vial of black hemlock hidden beneath his tunic. The heavy booming sound of a brass horn echoed through the keep. The whispers died instantly. The pack leaders straightened their postures, their inner wolves snapping to attention. The heavy iron doors groaned as they were pushed open by 4 massive royal guards, presenting His Majesty, the Sovereign of the North. King Silas of the Ironpeak Court. The herald shouted, his voice echoing off the stone. And beside him, the sovereign lunar queen Elara. Silas stepped through the threshold first. He was a terrifying vision of dominance. He wore his black iron armor, the spiked pauldrons gleaming in the firelight. His cloak of midnight wolf fur dragged behind him, and his crimson eyes swept the room with the lethal, calculating gaze of a predator. His aura hit the crowd like a physical shockwave, a heavy blanket of ozone and dark storms that immediately forced several lesser alphas to avert their eyes and bow their heads. But it was the woman beside him who stole the breath from every single wolf in the room. Elara did not hide behind the king. She walked beside him, her steps measured, graceful, and utterly fearless. She wore a gown of deep emerald velvet that contrasted beautifully with her flawless porcelain skin. Her silver blonde hair was woven with tiny, glittering diamonds, catching the firelight with every movement. The fragile, broken Omega was dead. In her place stood a magnificent ancient queen, but it was not just her beauty that silenced the room, it was her scent. The moment Elara entered, the harsh smells of sweat, damp wool, and roasted meat were instantly overpowered. The sweet, intoxicating fragrance of blooming winter roses and untamed starlight flooded the cavernous hall. It was a scent that bypassed logic and struck directly at the primitive core of every wolf present. "That is not an Omega," an older alpha whispered to his mate, his eyes wide with shock. "That is a white wolf." One by one, without a single word spoken, the proudest warriors of the Northern Territories began to drop to their knees. The sheer, overwhelming purity of Elara's magic commanded absolute respect. Thorn felt his stomach twist into a violent knot. He watched the woman. He had rejected the woman he had forced to scrub his floors, walking through a sea of kneeling kings and warlords. She looked like a goddess descending upon mortals, and the king walked beside her, not as a master, but as a devoted, fiercely protective shield. The pain of the severed bond flared in Thorn's chest. He pressed his hand against his tunic. Soon, he told himself, soon she will be nothing but a beautiful corpse. Silas and Elara took their places at the high table on the raised dais. Silas placed a gentle hand on the small of Elara's back, a public, undeniable claim of devotion. "Rise, Silas," commanded his voice, echoing effortlessly through the keep. The pack leaders stood, taking their seats at the circular tables. The feast began, but the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Every eye kept drifting back to the high table, mesmerized by the glowing silver eyes of the new queen. As the first course was cleared, the time for the ancient tradition of pack tributes began. Alphas stepped forward, offering gifts to honor the new royal union. Then it was the Frost Moon Pack's turn. Draven nudged Thorn violently in the ribs. "Go, now." Thorn took a deep breath. He stepped out from the shadows and walked down the center aisle. He carried a silver tray holding 2 ornate jewel-encrusted goblets filled with rich, dark red wine. The great hall went dead silent. Everyone knew the rumors. They knew this was the beta who had rejected the White Queen. Silas's posture instantly changed. He leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the arms of his heavy oak chair. His crimson eyes locked onto Thorn, burning with a violent homicidal fury. The scent of ozone crackled in the air, sharp and warning. Thorn stopped at the base of the dais. He dropped to one knee, keeping his head bowed. "Your Majesties," Thorn called out, forcing his voice to sound steady. "I step forward not as a proud warrior, but as a broken man seeking forgiveness. I was blind. I was arrogant. I cast away the greatest blessing the moon goddess ever gave me." Silas let out a low, terrifying snarl. Step back, Beta, before I tear your tongue from your throat. Elara placed a calming hand on Silas' arm. Let him speak, she said softly. Thorn looked up, his amber eyes locking onto Elara's silver ones. He lifted the silver tray. According to the ancient laws of the summit, Thorn continued, a rejected mate may offer a toast of peace, severing all past grievances. I offer this wine as a symbol of my absolute surrender. Silas flared his nostrils. His alpha senses were terrifyingly sharp. Beneath the scent of fermented grapes and spices, he caught it, a faint, sickeningly bitter smell. The smell of rotting earth and dark magic. Poison. Do not touch it, Silas roared, standing up so violently his heavy oak chair crashed backward onto the stone. Guards seize him, but Elara was already moving. She stepped down from the dais before the royal guards could even draw their swords. Her white wolf was humming inside her mind. A simple alchemist's poison was nothing but a drop of rain in her ocean of power. She stood directly in front of Thorn. You offer me peace? Thorn, Elara asked, her melodic voice ringing with cold authority. Yes, my Queen, Thorn whispered, his heart hammering wildly. Elara reached out. She did not take the cup on the left. She reached for the cup on the right, the one she knew he had tainted with the black hemlock. Elara, no, Silas shouted, panic stripping away his royal composure. He lunged forward to knock the cup from her hands, but Elara was faster. She brought the goblet to her lips and drank the dark wine. She swallowed it completely. The entire great hall held its collective breath. Silas froze on the steps of the dais, his face pale with absolute terror. Thorn stayed on his knees. He waited for her to choke. He waited for the silver light in her eyes to dim. 1 second passed, then 5, then 10. Nothing happened. Elara lowered the silver goblet. A faint, ethereal silver glow pulsed down her throat. Instantly, neutralizing and crushing the dark poison into harmless ash within her veins. You thought me weak, Elara said, her voice dropping to a deadly, echoing whisper. You thought you could break me with rejection, and now you thought you could kill me with poison. But you never understood what I truly am. Thorn stumbled backward, falling onto his hands. It is impossible. You should be dead. Gasps and shouts erupted from the circular tables. The pack leaders shot to their feet, drawing their weapons. Silas leapt down from the dais. The sheer relief of seeing his mate alive instantly transformed into an apocalyptic rage. Treason, Silas bellowed. His fangs fully descended, his crimson eyes blazing like hellfire. Wait, Elara commanded. The ancient authority in her voice washed over the hall, freezing everyone in place. Even Silas stopped. Elara turned her gaze to the back of the hall. Alpha Draven was already sprinting toward the heavy iron doors, desperate to escape. Seize him, Elara ordered the royal guards. 2 massive guards intercepted Draven, slamming the butt of their spears into his stomach and dragging him back toward the center of the room, throwing him to his knees beside the sobbing Thorn. Elara turned to face the hundreds of pack leaders. For 20 years, the world believed the White Pine clan died of a winter plague. Elara's voice rang out, clear and piercing. But there was no plague. The man kneeling before you, Alpha Draven, of the Frost Moon Pack, broke the sacred laws of hospitality. He murdered my mother. He murdered my father. He slaughtered my entire pack to steal our lands. Murmurs of absolute horror and outrage swept through the crowd, and he enslaved me. Elara continued, her voice trembling with righteous fury. He used dark runes to bind my magic. He made his biter Thorn believe I was a defective rat. And tonight, right in front of you all, they tried to assassinate your queen. The hall erupted. Alphas bared their fangs, howling for Draven's blood. Elara looked down at Thorn and Draven. The time for hiding was over. Let me show you what real power looks like. Elara closed her eyes. A blinding flash of ethereal silver light consumed the great hall of High Rock Keep. The massive stone floors trembled, vibrating with a deep frequency. When the silver light faded, the emerald-clad queen was gone. In her place stood a beast of mythical proportions. The massive white wolf towered over the high table, radiating a soft starlight glow. Her eyes were twin moons. Without a single command spoken, the entire assembly of Northern Pack leaders fell to the stone floor. Hundreds of the most ruthless warriors pressed their faces flat against the dirt, weeping openly in the presence of the Earth's true guardian. Thorn screamed. He looked up at the massive silver wolf, and his mind irrevocably snapped. He realized with soul-crushing certainty exactly what he had thrown away. He had rejected a literal goddess. Please, Thorn sobbed, rocking back and forth on the floor. Have mercy on your mate. In a seamless flash of light, she shifted back. Elara stood there, her emerald velvet gown perfectly intact. I told you once, Beta, Elara said softly, I have no mate but the king. Silas reached down to his waist and drew his heavy silver broadsword. You mistake peace for weakness. Draven Silas rumbled his voice, dark and merciless. You slaughtered innocent healers. You tortured a royal child, and you dared to bring black hemlock into my presence. For high treason your life is forfeit. Silas swung the broadsword. The execution was swift, brutal, and absolute. The treacherous alpha of the Frost Moon Pack was dead. Silas cleaned his blade with a sharp flick of his wrist. He turned his terrifying gaze to the sniveling mess, still on the floor. Death is far too merciful for what you have done. Thorn looked up with desperate hope. You will let me live. I will be your servant. I will scrub the floors of the Ironpeak Castle. You will not scrub my floors, Thorn Elara said softly. You wanted a warrior's life. You believed power was the only thing that mattered. So let us see how long a warrior lasts without a pack. and without a wolf. Elara raised her small, pale hand. A brilliant, concentrated beam of silver light shot from her hand, hitting Thorn squarely in the chest. Thorn shrieked. It was a sound of horrific agony. The pure magic tore through his body violently, hunting down the dark, arrogant wolf spirit hiding inside him. The magic severed the connection completely. Thorn collapsed convulsing as he was violently stripped of his enhanced strength and his alpha lineage. He was rendered entirely permanently human. A weak, scentless human in a world of monsters. "You are stripped of your rank," Elara declared. "You are cast out of the northern territories as a rogue." Guard Silas commanded, "Drag this trash out into the freezing wastes. He is ruining the feast." 2 massive royal guards seized Thorn. He did not even have the strength to kick. As they dragged him away, his wails of agony echoed off the stone walls. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind him. Thorn was gone, left to wander the snow until the cold claimed his miserable human life. Elara took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of her true mate beside her. She was finally truly free. 5 years later, the Northern Territories had never seen a spring so incredibly beautiful. The once frozen valleys were painted in brilliant shades of emerald green. Massive fields of wild white winter roses bloomed across the hillsides. The packs of the north no longer lived in constant fear of war and famine. Under the balanced, unified rule of King Silas and Queen Elara, they thrived. Elara stood on the grand master balcony of the Ironpeak Castle. She wore a simple flowing dress of white silk. The heavy silver crown of the sovereign Luna rested comfortably on her silver blonde hair. She was a woman in her prime, radiating a quiet, ancient power and a profound peace. Behind her, the heavy oak doors opened. The golden thread of their mate bond hummed instantly. The scent of ozone, deep winter storms and dark lightning washed over the balcony. Silas walked up behind her. He wrapped his massive, muscular arms around her waist, pulling her back flush against his broad chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply. "You are working too hard," my queen, Silas murmured. "The council meetings have been over for hours." Elara smiled, leaning her weight back into him. "I was just looking at the valley, thinking about how far we have come. I think about the girl shivering in the snow, bleeding from a broken bond. I wish I could go back in time and whisper to her to hold on just a little longer, because a king in black armor was coming to rewrite the stars for her." Silas turned her around within his arms, forcing her to look up into his glowing crimson eyes. "I would have searched for 1,000 years, Elara. I would have torn the universe apart until I found you." And Elara reached up, cupping his handsome face. "I know, my love." A sudden, joyful squeal interrupted their quiet moment. They both looked down toward the royal courtyard below. Running across the manicured green lawn was a tiny, chaotic blur of energy. It was a little girl no older than 4, wearing a messy royal blue dress. She had Elara's bright silver blonde hair, but when she turned her head to laugh at the massive dire wolf chasing her, her eyes flashed with the unmistakable brilliant crimson of her father. Princess Elara, the perfect blending of the white pine magic and the Ironpeak dominance. She is going to be a terror. When she grows up, Silas chuckled, a sound of pure fatherly pride. Elara laughed a bright, melodic sound. She is your daughter, Silas. She will rule this world one day, and she will never know what it feels like to be afraid. Silas looked down at his queen. The moonlight caught the diamonds in her hair. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a deep, breathtaking kiss. It tasted of wild roses, ancient magic, and a forever kind of love. The broken Omega was gone. The kitchen rat was a memory. Long live the White Queen. Have you ever wondered if your darkest moments are simply the universe preparing you for a majestic destiny? Elara's journey from a humiliated outcast to the most powerful queen in the world proves that the strongest magic is born from the deepest pain. Sometimes the ones who break us are only clearing the path for our true fated mate to find us. Did Elara's triumphant revenge and her breathtaking romance with the Alpha King send shivers down your spine? If you loved this epic story of betrayal, ultimate power, and a fiercely deserved happily ever after, please hit that like button. It helps our channel bring more magical stories to life. Don't forget to share this video with your pack and let me know in the comments below what your favorite moment of the King's revenge was. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss out on our epic fantasy romance audiobooks every single week. Until next time, let the moon guide you and stay wild.